L'chaim.
Hi. Okay, tell me about your family background.
My family background.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was born in Latvia,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up there. And my family comes from, different places, Soviet Union. Or it depends on how far back you want to go. Um, but I come from a mixed family, and my father's family has lived in, let's say, Lita, so like Latvia and Belarus, and traveled around, of course, because, I think one of my great grandfathers came from Łódź, from Poland, but, it's all around the time when, like, all these countries were one country, and it was a very different thing about moving around. So, um, my grandfather was born in Kraslava, which is southeast Latvia. Um, and my father also grew up in Latvia, but in the Soviet times. And my mother comes from Russian, Ukrainian. One of my great grandmothers was a Don Kazakh, so like also kind of like a very uh, mixed Slavic family from all over the place. Her father was in the military, so they also moved around a lot. So you know, it's kind of a lot of places.
Yeah.
It's a thing with a lot of places.
Yeah. What was your formal education?
I well, I went to quite a regular school with um, emphasis on classical studies. So, like, already in high school, I had a lot of history of art and philosophy and history and languages. We had more languages than regular schools, maybe. And then I went on to study engineering
Oh.
because in my family, everybody is some sort of technical something, like either chemists or engineers or something. In my family, we always said, and I think that's also part of the Soviet thinking, or a lot of Soviet Jewish thinking, that all these arts and humanities is something you do yourself. You just, if you want to do that, you read a book,
Yeah.
and the what you study is something that is a real profession. So I went on to study civil engineering to become to design heating and air conditioning, and actually did that for a couple of years. But I guess we live in a different world, and I quickly, I mean, I've been doing music also since I was like I started my first choir, where I was like performative choir when I was 3 years old. So I've been, yeah, so I've been always doing something. There was a lot of different things, and I always was in schools that are very art, with a lot of arts in there. So I, like, even without my parents maybe going like, oh, we need to get her music education, I actually was just picking all of that myself, because there were all these options in my school. So I did that, and then I was already also parallelly really getting strongly into Yiddish music, basically since I was a teenager. And around then, I started realizing that I could be an engineer and do that on the side, or I could do something that I love and actually get education in something that I'm much more interested in. I still didn't go into conservatory and that kind of schooling. I went to, I studied at the Culture Academy in Latvia, and I studied intercultural relations, focusing on cognitive linguistics and in folklore.
Oh.
Um, yeah, so that's my formal education background.
Yeah.
And then, as I mentioned, I've been doing music in very different ways, as all the different faculty, like extra curriculum things. So I was learning how to play the guitar. I was in musical theater. I was in number of choirs, and I was in. I sang church music. I sang popular music. I basically was grabbing everything that came my way for a long time, until at one point, well, I was probably around 14 or something. A friend of mine who also sang in the same choir as me, who went to high school together, her mom saw my last name, and she's also from a Jewish family, and she saw my last name and she said, "That girl is Jewish, you have to be friends." and she started she joined a Jewish youth theater at the Jewish community.
Okay.
And brought me in there too. And at that time I was like, why not? I would do anything.
So that's just how you kind of discovered it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't quite have that growing up. Partly because it's a mixed family. Partly because it's just a regular Soviet atheist background. So if I think back, I remember my grandparent friends sitting around singing some songs, and I would imagine that like some of them sound familiar. They probably were singing popular Yiddish songs. Because my grandfather's first language was Yiddish.
Okay.
But I didn't quite grow up with that, so I discovered it through this theater, and I just started. And there was a singing group there that I joined, and I started just going into it more and more. And that is going to be your next question, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Go for it.
So I'm not gonna let you ask it. I'm just gonna go for it. So another girl that wasn't in the theater, and she also plays the violin. At that time, the St. Petersburg Kless Fest was going quite strong.
Yeah.
And what they would do, they would send out all these invitations to Jewish communities around former Soviet Union, and to send their artists to learn this music, because there was this whole revival of that happening, and they were looking for more musicians from different communities to join in.
Great.
And she went, and actually she went as a singer the first time, because after she finished the music school, she was so traumatized that she didn't want to touch the violin. And she went and she saw all these musicians, and was like, I need to get my violin out and play this. So she went back again as a violinist, and she was like, okay, this is really great. I need to find people at home to do this with.
Yeah.
She knew Ilya Schneeves, who's also here, because they played in a rock band together, and he played drums. And right around that time, he was starting to learn accordion. So they decided to try to play together. And I was just getting into singing also some solo. And I always, by that time, and I'm around 18 at this point.
Okay.
So by that time, I kind of course there were Yiddish songs and Hebrew songs around, and I kind of always liked the Yiddish ones better. I don't know why. Partly because I was already learning German and I could understand the lyrics better.
Okay.
Partly I just connected to the I don't know, something in the music. You know how it's more of a gut feeling than it's not It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna do the music of my grandfather. I never had that.
It was the music itself.
It was the music itself. I never had that sentiment of I'll bring something back to life or whatever that,
Okay.
you know. I know that there are people that definitely have this straight. I just was like, oh, this is nice. I want to be doing this, you know. Like I just really liked it. And so we started trying things out together, and then we started traveling and going to all these first festivals in Russia, in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and then we went to started going and learning in Weimar, Germany. They have a really important Yiddish music summer school there, which is a several week-long festival with deep focus, with smaller groups just going very deep into music and into all the context and everything. And I barely even noticed how it just, people go like, when did you decide to do this professionally? I was like, I never did. It kind of just, it's, it kind of all snowballed in a certain way. I just couldn't do it halfway. It was way too interesting for me. And I started discovering more and more and finding new things and falling in love with it more and more every day. So I started learning the language, I started learning everything I could about the background and the culture and
Wow.
yeah.
Now, did you have any mentors that fostered this and helped you through it?
Of course. Well, first of all, I had a really warm welcome into the community. When I remember it was funny because like it took me a couple of years to actually get to go to a festival. I really wanted to, but there was always like either, I had my exams during that time, because I was in college,
Yeah.
or I got really sick and couldn't go. There was always like for a couple of years I just couldn't get there, and I really wanted to, and there was always this thing in the way, and I was getting frustrated. And my friends Ilya and Inna would go, and then they would bring all these like videos and tapes, and I would just like watch that, and I had these artists that I was admiring so much. And I remember when I finally was going to Moscow and Adrian Cooper was going to be there, and I was so excited. We were on this overnight train, and I couldn't even lie down in the bunk and sleep. Like I was so excited. We got there, and what they did there, they had these introduction concerts. So imagine, those festivals are very different from this, because it was like, imagine just like about 60 people living in a small kind of like place right out of Moscow. Everybody living in this one place, sleeping together, eating together, having class from 9 in the morning all day, and then jamming all night. We didn't sleep. It was insanity what we did there, really insanity. But it was just this really amazing tight community, and I knew about it all. So, and I arrived my very first time. All these people that I've heard recordings of and heard so much about are there. And what they do, they have this introduction concert where everybody just performs for each other, just one song or something, and to kind of like say hello, here I am. And we get in, and there is no list or anything. There's just like a person that calls people on, and this person goes like, well, let's start with the new ones, you go. And my heart sank. I was so scared. I was petrified because like all these people who are really versed in all of this are sitting right in front of me, and I'm like about to so I got up, I sang.
What did you say?
I don't remember. Around that time, I had very, very limited repertoire because, well, not limited. It was more of it must have been something from like American Yiddish theater, kind of like something like Hopkila or something like in that. Maybe it was Hopkila actually. You know the. So because back then, like I didn't know about differences of what the different Yiddish song styles and are. It's always like if it's in Yiddish, it's a Yiddish song. That's all I like. I didn't know like the difference between theater and folk and all the different genres and everything. It was just, and I think just in general, around that time, and even now still, people don't have those divisions as clearly in Yiddish song. But that's a whole other topic, which we can talk about. But I think like we should do this a little fragmented, like just. And I remember I just like sang that, and I was so like I remember my heart beating so fast, and there was like this dining hall right next to the room where everybody was performing. So it just like walked into there. It was dark, and Adrienne followed me, and she just gave me this big hug, and said, "Welcome," and left. And it was just this gesture of, "Come on in, and keep doing this." That somehow was an incredible encouragement, and she definitely was an amazing mentor and thinker and just a wonderful performer, obviously, but also she nourished and encouraged research and encouraged different sorts of ideas. She was definitely a very important person for me. Another life-changing experience was Weimar, because that festival is it's so deep. You know, you can go deep if you know that you want to go deep in most of these camps, because here you need to kind of like build your own program. You go do this, you go do that, which is great. What they do in Weimar is just a very different thing, because you're like 25, 30 people that all have the same program together, and you study from day to night, and you just go into detail, and you go deep, and you can spend an hour on learning one song. So it was just like the whole musical approach to it, not as much ethnographical approach to it also.
Okay.
That just blew me away, and I started talking to the artistic director of Weimar and learning from him a lot, Alan Byrne, and his musical thinking and his ideas of approaching just music, not only Yiddish music. That has been an incredible influence on me, because he also has this whole philosophy that place is built on, of otherness. The organization that runs it is called Other Music, because they focus on finding yourself through the other. So like there's a lot of combinations. So every year has a different topic. Like there was a Roma year, there was a Turkish year. Right now we just did 2 years of Other Israel. So we are always looking at Yiddish music in the context of otherness, which is a very deep way to look at it, and an important way to look at it, because it kind of takes a culture out of a vacuum and like makes it as open as it actually always has been. So
Okay.
that's an important thing. And then what happened is that I discovered this Ruth Rubin record, like from Ruth Rubin archive, that came out on Folkways, like this one record, not of her, but of actual archives. And I was like, what is that? Why is nobody teaching these songs? Because they were like these unaccompanied Yiddish songs in the style that I've not heard before.
Okay.
Because I think somehow in revival, in this whole klezmer revival thing, what happened, that a lot of Yiddish singing was informed by Yiddish theater
Yeah.
and different sides of it. And even if people did folk songs, they still did it in theater style more than in traditional style. And out of I can barely think of anybody but Michael Alpert who have been doing really these old traditional songs on that level. I mean, of course, there were people doing that the whole time, but let's say from the revival scene, really just Michael.
Yeah.
And it all started kind of like from that record. It all started coming together, and I was, where do I do this? And I came to Alan Byrne with this, and I was like, why? How do I learn this? Because after going to these workshops for a couple of years, I was at the point where I was saying, listen, we can sit around and learn songs in a group. It's great. And it's very helpful, and it's helpful to learn song from a mentor and somebody who's been, but I can do this with a book at home, you know, where
Yeah.
like it's not, I can get repertoire at home.
Yeah.
I'm not coming here for repertoire. I need to find who does this. And he was like, I don't know who does this. Like, we don't know anybody who does this. And around the same time, Center for Traditional Music and Dance posted a video. It must have been around 10 years ago.
Okay.
Center for Traditional Music and Dance posted a video of this concert that they did a long time ago with Dave Terrace. And it was all mostly focused on Dave Terrace. And there was also, who's singing there? I'm spacing out on that right now. But somebody who's been recorded a lot and who's like on Yiddish Song of the Week. I'm absolutely spacing out which one that was. Somebody was in there. And Ethel Rain, who sang in that style. And Alan was blown away. He showed that to me. He was like, see, she can do it. He never knew that she could do it because for years and years, everybody knew her as a Balkan singer
Yeah.
because of the penny whistlers. And everybody knew that she can do all the Balkan stuff and the Russian stuff and all of those things. But nobody knew that she could, like, not nobody, but, and Pete was like, that's what I'm talking about. That's why I posted that video. And Ethel hadn't been even teaching Yiddish song at that time. And I was also around that time already getting more prominent and in Weimar and starting teaching there and kind of like
Yeah.
already starting going like, let's do this. I was kind of, I'm thinking about it now and I'm thinking like, I was a ballsy young girl because like I would be like 23 and go to somebody who is my master and teacher and somebody like who's 30 years older than me and has been in this all and go like, I'm gonna give you a lecture now on what I need to be learning. It's like what we need to be I don't know how, but you have to make this happen. I'm thinking about it now and I go like, whoa. Like he must have thought like that girl is intense. But this is the thing, like I didn't think of it as that, you know. I just like was like, I need to tell you what I need right now.
Yeah. Well.
And so he brought Ethel to Weimar and focused the whole year on Yiddishkeit. And he brought Ethel, and it was her first time teaching Yiddish lyrical songs as a full thing. I mean, she did a little bit of that before, but not like as a full class. So she said that she wanted to do it with Itzik Gottesman and with Michael Alpert.
Yeah.
And that was in 2010.
Okay.
It's 8 years ago. Can you imagine that there has been this whole movement of Yiddish song revival, Yiddish music revival, and that hadn't happened till 2010. Of course, Michael has been teaching these songs, and Michael has done all these recordings and everything. But he had like his recordings somewhere on tape in his apartment under his bed, and nobody knew how to get to them. And he would like from time to time show like Bronya Sakina sang this way. There's a new song. Like also like the whole digitizing thing wasn't happening as much.
Yeah.
So there was like, and suddenly like in this last years there's this whole breakthrough. So when Adel was teaching that class, and also they started the blog around that same time. That was around the time when they started the Yiddish Song of the Week blog. It, like, all of these things started, and Stonehill Archive went online around the same time. So like, suddenly, from zero, we had all these sources, and I started studying with Ethel, and like I heard her analyzing this, and she kind of like gave all these keys to this is listen for. You know how when you hear something and you don't know what to listen for, you will not learn from it as much as you could in a certain way. Like I was already like listening to what was available, but I didn't know what to listen for. And she has this amazing way of just like dissecting what's happening. And she also insisted on us not learning from her because she didn't want to teach just her style. She wanted us to learn from recordings. So she would play recordings line by line and analyze them for us in front of us. And that was an absolutely mind-blowing thing to just like have that set of keys to go to that, because after that I could go to all these recordings and start analyzing them. And also another thing I discovered around the same time was this voice technique school that, because also of course getting vocal coaching, you always get, and I also at one point earlier started attending an evening music school where I started learning, you know, like all the solfege and the piano and classical singing, right? So but all the classical singing, it gives you a lot, definitely, no question, and all my choral singing background, and all my musical theater singing background, it all gives you a lot of voice technique and understanding, but it's not necessarily that all of that is applicable to folk singing in a direct way.
Okay.
Because it's a different voice production.
Yeah.
So around the same time, I came across this thing that is a different voice technique school, which is just a very physical way of looking at your vocal tract, with just isolating different parameters and building different voices. That is also with this philosophy that every human body is built the same way, but we all sound different in different ways. Why do we always teach people to sing just like, oh, whatever, right? Like this is, otherwise you'll hurt yourself and you'll ruin your voice or whatever that, you know, all those mottos are. But how do Bulgarians sing that way? How do Hasidim sing for hours and hours and it's a completely different thing?
Yeah.
How do, you know, and how does Bronya Sakina sing? And how does Livsha Shechter Vidman sing? And, you know, and you just go like, wait a minute. So there's, and around the same time I started discovering these other voice techniques. So I started studying that as well. But they're, of course, even though they're different, they're still focusing on classical and musical theater. And I started learning how to apply that to folk music.
Okay.
And analyzing folk music through that perspective of vocal physicality. So those are the main steps.
Okay. Great. Okay, that's great. Um, I'd love to go back to, you're talking about Ruth Rubin
Yeah.
and those songs that you discovered in one of her albums. Would you be able to give an example and sing one of those songs?
Well, so it's this Jewish life in the old country
Yeah.
thing, and and it's a funny record also because there's it's field recordings, right? So um, some singers are you know just better singers and some are
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
informants. It's always like very very random. But there was this one song that I went crazy about, um, and it's on the thing. It just says a woman from Lithuania, but I think somewhere in the notes there actually is a name for her, and it's this song called Fornavek. I call it Fornavek. It's also in Bergovsky as an instrumental tune that is called Fornavek. That's why I call it Fornavek. I guess it's like this. Zu dem Prisi Forst die sich schon stehen. Oi, how Jenny schon goten hus aus der Reus im Kaiser sen. Und der ganze Pressutz Besos, die mir gefällt. JWST ни разу en saketina ita mais. Was ich bin kazola noch dir. Ich hab dir gar nicht aufgetan, ja mais. Ich hab sich verschickt. Favor, Stephen, mira, vecaita, yerle, Teichenteren, wenn jährlich vergehen, doch Genie, schon Gott, Reus, im Kaiser sen. Amazon, schon Kanane, viel nach seine Schmissen. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful song.
It's a beautiful song, and the thing is that there's so much in it, and it's so detailed, and it's so nuanced, and suddenly it like hearing that opened this whole other world to me because all I heard before, not all I heard before, but my idea of Yiddish song before, a lot of it was coming from all the kind of if I heard anything older, it was mostly something like Aaron Lebedev and Pesachke Burstein, like all those guys, and Molly Pecan, and like all the Lower East Side Yiddish theater guys.
Yeah.
And they're all like, it's all like there's this grandness, and there is like the cantorial influence on their voices, and there's the theatrical, and they have like these voices, and there's this whole like what's a good example? Like I'll come up with something in a second. Give me a moment. I'm just looking for something that is to show the as much of an opposite as possible. Like I don't love this song for many reasons, but like this is a Lebedev song, right?
Okay.
So it goes like Mazel tov jeden seid alle Freilach Machtal chayim mitagid glasul wine. So it's a whole other world, right?
Total.
It's an other world, and there's this whole, and of course, like they will go, like this song is all, it's like celebrating the beginning of the state of Israel, and it goes like, you know, like it goes like Pitzich si jeder Roi se wie am Melach, Lomer zusammen freila Heinz sein. So he has this, as Gott hat bewiesen, it's like very round and unser Sakeli. But also with a lot of that ornament, of course, it's very Yiddish. I'm interrupting myself.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
Mir haben unser heilig Land zurück. And then he breaks into this Shechianu. And it's all very cantorial, like Vekiamanu, Vekiamanu. Right? Like it has like all of that. Like he has like all these beautiful things. But it's a whole other world. And all I heard is that, or like even later renditions of that, you know? And a lot of it, like, it's very interesting. Like if we don't have a lot of these songs in our ear, we don't even hear those details. Like I've known Michael Alpert for a long time until I actually realized that what he is doing is this, you know, it's like it's these old songs in that style actually. I was just like, oh, Michael sings like Michael, you know, because I didn't hear anybody else sing like that. So I was like, oh, it's just Michael's style. He has an interesting style. But it took me like a long time to put these things together, and when it all came in a system, you go like, oh, interesting. That's what it is, you know?
See. Yeah.
So that is a thing. And then I also started getting into like all these like actually Struli Dresner is the person that I started like looking at and going like, you have an amazing singing style. What is that? And he has like this Hasidic style, which is again a whole other thing. And he does like these whole like you know, niguanim that have like all these. That's a good one. Like it's again a completely different voice, and it's all like in a very, so that has been like my whole like research of my past couple of years of just how to put all of those together, how to find what is what does all of that mean, and where to find all of this. So, and now we have all these sources that we also didn't have before, that we can actually make friends with all these people that are not around anymore, even, you know?
So we've gone over all these different amazing performers and styles that you've learned. I would like to talk about you and your style a bit.
Okay.
First of all, like, you have this tremendous stage presence. Like, eyes on her, you know? How did you develop that stage presence and those movements, like these moves? Like, tell me about that.
Well, I think it's also, I mean, you saw me perform with Dobranoc, and that's like a high power band. So I also have my rock band that a lot of members of Dobranoc are actually in it. It's called Vorspiel, and we do like this 70s prog rock versions of these old ballads actually.
Wow.
So we don't have a CD here. The old one is sold out. The new one is not mixed. So we're right in between right now. But you can find it online.
Okay. Yeah.
But I also do. I don't know how I developed that, to be completely honest. Well, part of it is like I definitely on a lot of movement things.
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of it is, I believe, is like the Yiddish movement. I believe a lot of it is just listening to the music, because the music just tells you everything.
Yeah.
But I also took quite a few solo dance classes with Zev Feldman.
Okay.
Because
yeah.
Zev has this whole gesture thing that is so special.
What are some
and
gestures?
so unique. The gestures, well, it's, you don't, like, yeah, it's all of this, you know,
Yeah.
like, there's, you don't do that without music, but there's the Yiddish solo, like, I do that all the time when I talk, actually. All of these gestures I do when I talk.
Yeah.
Because that's part of this whole world. But also, I think I just was always, I was a kid that, like, I was so loud and annoying when I was little. I was all over the place. I was jumping. I was,
Yeah.
you know, when I was like in the first or second grade, in my school, teachers, it was a nice school. The teachers were, for one, like, family evening that was organized, all teachers wrote little poems about kids.
Uh-huh.
And the poem about me was like, how is it, was something saying like, how is it possible that she's talking through the whole class, but if you ask her, she still has heard everything and knows it? Because I was sitting in the front desk, like, kind of like to the wall, and I was like halfway to the teacher and to my audience, which was the whole class. I was really disturbing them. If I think about it now, but it was like 7-year-old, you know, like,
Yeah.
I have an excuse, I didn't know better. But I was like talking the whole time. And if the teacher would go like, you know how teachers go like, what did I just say?
Yeah.
I would repeat everything word because like as a kid already, I had this magical skill of listening and talking at the same time.
Huh.
It's really hard because people think I interrupt them a lot, but I don't. I still listen. I'm starting to answer while they're talking.
Okay.
But I think it's also a Jewish thing. I think Alan also told me this story that his mother was talking to him,
Yeah.
and he was listening, and at one point she was like, are you listening? He's like, yes, I'm listening. Well, how should I know that you're listening if you're not saying anything? Yeah,
That's
but
Jewish.
I'm that person for sure.
Gotcha.
So I had that, and
So your stage personality
Yeah, but
represents your
I think
self.
a lot of it represents myself, and also it's a good place to put all of that energy. Now that I'm putting all of that energy on stage, I'm actually a much nicer person to be around, because I don't have this whole constant, I need to do things. I do still have that also in my everyday life, but
Uh-huh.
but there's a lot of energy that goes there, so that's a healthy way of dealing with that. But I also, I mean, I was in different theaters my whole life, as like growing up. I did a lot of physical theater. I did improvisation theater. I did like, I did a lot of theater
Yeah.
work, and I was always into that. So I think, you know, like, I've been getting that kind of like stage presence training my whole life, but I always was craving being, you know, somewhere in the middle. So it's kind of both of those things.
Yeah.
And but I also really enjoy doing all these different things, you know. I have really, at this point, I'm kind of surprised myself, but I have very different projects that I'm working with, where I'm trying to do very different sides of Yiddish music. Like, I'm part of this group called the Zemmer Ensemble that is playing music recorded by Jewish artists in Berlin in 1930s, which ranges from cabaret and folk music to classical and cantorial and everything. And it's such a interesting thing to do all these different genres in one program.
Yeah.
And it's much more cabaret and like, and then I have a rock band where I get to jump around and wave my hair in different directions. And I have more folky bands.
What hair?
Oh, hair. I do have a lot of hair. I don't need to put it down right now. I'm sure you can find a picture of me just doing this whole thing. And head banging and all of that.
Yeah.
I
So that's more of your rock influence.
that's well,
those
but I
rhythms.
also listen. The reason we have this rock band, it's not because we thought, oh, it would be fun to take these old songs and make rock ballads out of them. First of all, I do deeply believe that there is there is that component in there, even though these lyrical songs are so intimate, but their attitude, and there's something very rock and roll about them. And also one of other people that I had a big pleasure and honor to study with, and I call him my other Yiddish Zayde, Arkady Gendler, who lived in he was born in Bessarabia, but he lived in Ukraine. Passed away a couple of years ago at like it was 95, 96, I guess. Was an absolute treasure of Yiddish song. He always said, "Look at this. This is rock music."
Uh-huh.
But also my background, when I was a teenager, I was listening to Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and The Doors. So like those were my favorite bands.
Yeah.
Like I was not a cool person listening to whatever pop music was happening at that time. I kind of missed all of that when and I'm still like I live in a parallel world. So I was listening to, like a lot of 60s, 70s music, and so for me to be putting those things together, it's just putting two things that I love and kind of like know and understand together. It's not this kind of like I'll take this and try to make something out of it. It was a very natural
I see.
development. And I have like I just do all these different things, and I really enjoy playing with different qualities and different sides of this music, where you can both jump around and be loud, but also can be just standing alone on stage and quietly singing an unaccompanied ballad, and people will listen to you. Like that's what I like. But also there's so I'm working on a new project, which is a band called Lebedik Yankee, because we're trying to put together the American string band music attitude and Yiddish music and Yiddish song, and which are also interestingly there are interesting parallels there. So we're looking at that, and just trying to see all the different facets of Yiddish music and explore them and perform them in every possible way that I can.
Wonderful. Yeah. So you've started diving into your current ongoing projects.
Yeah.
And I know you also have a boyfriend. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
recent.
Yeah.
What inspired you to that?
Well, that so Zisel Slipovich, who is the leader of this band Litvakis, and really the author of the idea, it was his idea. Like he and I kind of, I was passing by New York. I don't even remember why, and we've known each other from before even he moved to New York. He's from Belarus, I'm sorry, and I was passing by and I just came over for dinner, and he started telling me about this idea that he had of, and his focus was on Litvish Yiddish music and Litvish style, because a lot of what we're learning is really based on more southern styles, like coming from Ukraine and Bessarabia, and partly because we just have more of recorded material from there.
I see,
and there's more understanding of that style. And he's doing the Litvish thing, and I'm from Latvia, so I kind of always was interested in it. So I'm always asking him all these things about it. So we were, having dinner together, nerding out about things, and he started telling me that he has this idea of putting this project together of Jewish music about the neighboring people and the neighbors' music about about the Jews, and it could be like, you know, these things. And I was like, oh, this is a great idea. I would love to be part of it, and like also do some research. And we could do also Latvian stuff in there, you know, because I have that background and
Yeah.
those connections. And we could do the Belarusian and the Latvian, and you know, like put it all together and make it like a little bit of a wider geography. And he was like, yeah. And I have a good Russian name for it, but I can't come up with an English name. The Russian name he had was Drugoy. Drug in Russian means friend, and goy is goy. But the word drugoy is the other. So it kind of is a very,
Oh,
it's beautiful, right?
That is, absolutely.
But it's kind of like, it's so beautiful that you can't kind of translate it. So I kind of joked and I said, oh, well, just name it boyfriend. And he was like, well, that's brilliant. And I do think that boyfriend has, the thing is that it has like other connotations
Yeah.
in the English language that already exist in a certain way. So it makes it kind of much funnier than the Russian name is.
Yeah, which is much more.
It's much. I still love the Russian name, and we were like, it's the problem is that also if you just even transliterate the Russian name, it looks like druggy. So, so like, it's really hard to do that. So we're like, what are we gonna do with this? So we just stuck with this, and like the Russian is probably even written in Cyrillic. Like we recorded that too. It's gonna come out with soon,
Okay.
hopefully. And I find, and that's another incredibly interesting project for me, both on the artistic side and on the research side, because like we got to like find all these amazing material of this dialogue, but also it's all about this whole idea of, you know how often we talk about, well, Jews lived in their little shtetl, and next to that there was a Ukrainian shtetl. And next to it, you know how there's always this separation. We always talk about like this kind of like very close societies, and it's not that that's not true, but also, let's face it, there was always dialogue. There were always people were like falling in love with each other. They were making fun of each other. There is a lot of borrowed music. There is a lot of intermingling between different communities. And I think it's an important statement also these days, because now people go like, well, I'm not gonna say those words, but I'm gonna say, let's go back to the good times when, you know, we all were in our cultures, like where we were not mixing up too much, but we were, you know, now all these people are coming in and they're gonna make things wrong. And it's like, we go back to the good old days, and like, well, here's good old days where everybody was, you know, intermingling, and cultures don't grow up in vacuum. They don't. We need to see how we all function in the context of a larger world. So to me, that project is not only interesting artistically and musically, it's also really, it's an important statement that way.
Absolutely.
So there's that.
And I guess as we wrap up, where do you see the future of you in Jewish folk music, or immediate future even?
Well, my immediate future is to finish up with Klez Canada and go to Toronto and do the Ashkenaz festival, and then go to Berlin, where I haven't been in a while. Yeah, go home and actually be there for like at least a little bit. But in general, I think we're at if we're talking about Yiddish song, we're at a very exciting point, because we got to a place where there's a new interest, a new wave of very interesting singers coming up, and people getting into old stuff, really learning from it, and creating very interesting new music out of it, or informed by it. There is I think what happened in Klezmer Revival is that all the instrumentalists that didn't want to play old traditional music went and played Irish music or whatever they did, and old time, and you know how there's, and all the singers still stayed and sang show tunes, which is great
Yeah.
and very important that that happened.
Yeah.
But somehow very few people got into this singing old style, and it's happening now, and it's amazing, and it's so fascinating and deep, and I hope that there's this new generation of people doing things with it. Of course, there is a large language issue because we don't have as many audiences that understand language fluently to follow these stories in the songs. But there are lots of ways to do it. Like Daniel Kahn and I have a duet program that is called Strange Love Songs. And we just sing all the most devastating songs in five languages. It's in German, in Yiddish, in Russian, in English. And we just go, we translate songs. We do the originals, we do the translations. We have super titles so that everybody knows how devastating everything that we do is. There are lots of ways to work with this material to make it accessible, be it on emotional level, be it on musical level, be it on textual level. I think all of that is happening, and different people are finding all these different ways to get into this, and I think that's an incredibly exciting moment, and we'll just see where it goes from there.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Vajem si bei sich allein in Stieb. Es ist Parve, nicht Milchig, nicht Fleischig, nur am Eichel